Have you ever wondered what the full meaning of LGBTQ+, or what it is all about? What does LGBTQ+ even stand for? What is the history of LGBTQ+, and where did it start? Who are the people involved? Did you know that some ancient cultures celebrated same-sex relationships, while others tried to erase them completely? What changed? How did a single night at a bar in New York change the course of LGBTQ history forever? What does it mean to be transgender? And why is legal recognition of gender identity still such a global struggle? How did the HIV/AIDS crisis shape the modern LGBTQ rights movement? And why are its effects still being felt today? Is it possible to define queer, or is it meant to be undefinable? And why are some people reclaiming this word? Sit back and relax while I tell you everything there is to know about LGBTQ+ and the truth no one is telling you. LGBTQ+ is an acronym which stands for L, lesbian, which refers to women attracted to other women. G, gay, men attracted to men. B, bisexual, which refers to people born with attraction to both men and women. T, transgender, people whose gender identity differs from their birth sex. Q, queer or questioning, umbrella term for non-heterosexual or non-cisgender individuals. The plus sign represents additional identities, including intersex, which refers to people born with reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't fit typical male-female categories. Asexual, which refers to people with little or no sexual attraction. Pansexual, which refers to people born with attraction to people regardless of gender. Non-binary, which refers to people identifying outside the male-female binary. Genderqueer, which refers to people identifying as neither male nor female. Genderfluid, fluid gender identity. Now let's dive into each aspect of this acronym and discuss its historical, social, and cultural significance, as well as the issues faced by members of the LGBTQ community. 1. Lesbian. A lesbian is a woman or female who is romantically and/or sexually attracted to other women. Lesbian relationships have been documented across cultures for centuries. In ancient Greece, female relationships were often celebrated in poetry, such as those by Sappho from the Isle of Lesbos. However, by the Middle Ages, Christianity and other religious doctrines imposed stricter sexual morals, condemning same-sex relationships, including between women. In the 1960s and 1970s, a second-wave feminism, alongside the LGBTQ liberation movement, gave lesbians a stronger voice. Organizations like the Daughters of Bilitis, which was founded in 1955, provided one of the first support networks for lesbian women. Many lesbians also participated in feminist movements, although there were tensions between lesbians and straight feminists, particularly in regard to issues like lesbian visibility. Black and Latin America, Latina, lesbians often had to fight on multiple fronts, against sexism, racism, and homophobia. Figures like Audre Lorde became key in discussing the intersections of race, gender, and sexuality, focusing on the importance of recognizing and addressing the unique struggles of women of color in the lesbian community. For many years, lesbians were underrepresented or misrepresented in media. They were often depicted through the male gaze, sexualized or fetishized, or as tragic figures, the tragic lesbian trope. Popular representation began to emerge more strongly in the 1990s, with shows like The L Word and films like Desert Hearts showcasing the diversity of lesbian lives. In the 19th and 20th centuries, in Western societies, lesbians often had to form Boston marriages, romantic, though sometimes non-sexual, partnerships between women, as a way to live together without raising suspicion. Romantic relationships between women during this period were often dismissed or trivialized because of the perception that only male sexuality was real sexuality. Lesbians were once forced to hide in plain sight in order to live with the women they loved or had feelings for. Lesbian identity has been marginalized throughout history, though women have always formed same-sex relationships. The term became more prominent in the 20th century with the emergence of feminist movements. In ancient cultures like Greece and Rome, same-sex relationships were often discussed or documented. Throughout history, lesbians have faced significant social stigma, particularly related to ideas about women's roles and sexuality. The struggle for lesbian visibility and rights has intersected heavily with feminist movements. Number 2. A gay person, commonly referring to men, is someone who is romantically and/or sexually attracted to people of the same gender. The term gay is sometimes used broadly to describe the entire LGBTQ community. Gay men have experienced varying levels of acceptance depending on culture and time. Same-sex relationships were sometimes tolerated in ancient times but have been criminalized in many parts of the world in more recent history. The modern gay rights movement began gaining momentum after events like the Stonewall riots of 1969, which was a series of violent confrontations that began in the early hours of June 28, 1969, between police and gay rights activists outside the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in the Greenwich Village section of New York City. As the riots progressed, an international gay rights movement was born, which was a catalyst for LGBTQ+ advocacy. This event sparked days of protests and led to the creation of many LGBTQ advocacy organizations such as the Gay Liberation Front. The Stonewall riots are now celebrated annually as Pride Month, a global event recognizing LGBTQ rights and achievements. The homophile movement, 1940s to 1960s, was another movement. Before the Gay Liberation Movement, smaller groups like the Mattachine Society in the US and the Homosexual Law Reform Society in the UK worked to decriminalize homosexuality and combat negative stereotypes. In the 1980s-1990s, the AIDS crisis had a profound impact on the gay community. It was often referred to as the gay plague in the early years due to its disproportionate effect on gay men. Governments were slow to respond, and the epidemic was met with widespread homophobia. Advocacy organizations like ACT UP and Gay Men's Health Crisis emerged to demand research funding, public education, and treatment. The crisis brought the LGBTQ community together in a new way, creating solidarity and spurring many people to become activists. However, the stigma surrounding HIV/AIDS continues to affect gay men today. The gay rights movement saw major victories in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Decriminalization of homosexuality spread across much of the world, starting with countries like the Netherlands and progressing globally, though many places still criminalize gay relationships. One of the biggest legal battles in the gay community was the fight for same-sex marriage. This fight culminated in the U.S. Supreme Court decision in a case Obergefell v. Hodges, 2015, which legalized same-sex marriage nationwide. Historically, gay individuals have been subjected to legal, social, and religious persecution, including criminalization of homosexual acts, discrimination in the workplace, and social ostracism. The gay rights movement has fought for decriminalization, anti-discrimination laws, and marriage equality till this day. 3. Bisexual. A bisexual person is someone who is attracted to more than one gender. This could mean they are attracted to both men and women or to people of various gender identities. Bisexuality has often been misunderstood or erased, even within LGBTQ circles. Bisexual people have been accused of being confused or in transition, rather than recognized as having a valid sexual orientation. In ancient cultures, like in Rome and Greece, bisexuality wasn't seen as a distinct identity because relationships with both genders were often socially acceptable, particularly for men. In the modern era, bisexuality has been dismissed or misunderstood, with many people seeing it as a phase or a way station on the path to being either gay or straight. Even within the LGBTQ community, bisexual people often face erasure or bi-invisibility. This comes in the form of disbelief or denial about their sexuality, with some viewing bisexuals as indecisive or as actually gay or straight, depending on their current partner. Groups like BiNet USA have worked to raise awareness of bisexual issues, but bi people still report feeling marginalized in both LGBTQ and heterosexual spaces. Studies have shown that bisexuals are at a higher risk for mental health issues due to this lack of acceptance. Biphobia, which means discrimination against bisexuals, can come from both heterosexual and homosexual communities. Bisexual people often experience a sense of invisibility, as their identity is frequently assumed to be either gay or straight based on their current relationship. Number 4. Transgender. A transgender person is someone whose gender identity does not align with the sex they were assigned at birth. For example, a person born as female at birth who later identifies as male is transgender. It's important to note that being transgender relates to gender identity, not sexual orientation. A transgender person can be straight gay, bisexual, etc., depending on their attraction to others. The visibility of transgender people in mainstream culture has increased in recent years, though transgender individuals have existed in all cultures throughout history. Different cultures have recognized non-binary or third-gender individuals, such as the Hijra in South Asia or the Two-Spirit people among some Native American tribes. The rigid binary view of gender, male and female, was imposed in many parts of the world through colonialism, erasing the gender diversity that existed in indigenous cultures. Transgender people face significant discrimination in areas such as healthcare, employment, and legal recognition. They are often targets of violence, particularly transgender women of color. There is an ongoing struggle for access to gender-affirming healthcare, inclusive policies, and protection from violence and discrimination. In 1960s, 1970s, early transgender activists like Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson were critical to the early LGBTQ rights movement, particularly in their involvement in the Stonewall riots. One of the major challenges for the transgender community is access to health care, particularly gender-affirming care such as hormone replacement therapy, HRT, and surgeries. The World Professional Association for Transgender Health, W8, has developed standards of care, but access varies widely depending on geography and socioeconomic status. Transgender people often face challenges with legal recognition of their gender identity. Some countries have progressive laws allowing gender markers to be changed without surgery, but in many places, transgender individuals must undergo invasive medical procedures or face legal barriers before their gender is recognized on official documents. The visibility of transgender people has increased significantly in the last decade, with figures like Laverne Cox, Janet Mock, and Caitlyn Jenner bringing transgender issues into the mainstream. However, with increased visibility has come increased violence. Number 5. Queer or questioning. Queer, originally a slur, queer has been reclaimed by some as a broad, inclusive term for people who do not identify as heterosexual or cisgender. The word queer has been reclaimed in recent years by many LGBTQ people as a way to reject the rigid labels of gay or straight. It can refer to anyone who rejects traditional ideas of gender and sexuality. This includes people who are non-binary, not identifying as exclusively male or female, genderqueer, or gender fluid. It represents fluidity in both sexual orientation and gender identity. However, the term can still be seen as offensive to some, especially older generations, depending on the context. Some people are unsure of their sexual orientation or gender identity and are in the process of exploring or questioning it. The inclusion of questioning recognizes that self-identification can be a complex, evolving journey. Non-binary people face challenges similar to transgender people, such as legal recognition and healthcare access, but they also face unique struggles because society often fails to understand non-binary identities. For example, many forms and institutions still only offer male or female as options for gender, excluding non-binary people. One of the significant areas of advocacy for non-binary individuals is the use of gender-neutral pronouns such as they, them. This has been met with resistance in some circles but is becoming increasingly accepted in others. Number 6. Many LGBTQ people also belong to other marginalized groups, and the intersection of race, class, disability, and other factors can compound discrimination and challenges. Intersectionality is the idea that people have multiple, interconnected identities that shape their experiences. For example, Black transgender women often face disproportionately higher rates of violence and poverty than their white counterparts. A Black lesbian, for instance, might experience discrimination differently than a white lesbian because of her race. This concept, coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, has become a central part of LGBTQ advocacy, helping to highlight how race, class, gender, and sexuality interact. LGBTQ history and issues are complex and multifaceted, with each identity within the acronym representing a rich history of struggle, triumph, and continued activism. Understanding the deep cultural, historical, and social context behind these identities is key to appreciating the ongoing fight for equality. Challenges. The LGBTQ community faces unique challenges regarding mental health. Due to societal stigma, discrimination, and isolation, Members of the LGBTQ community are at increased risk for mental health issues, such as depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. Minority stress theory suggests that the added stress of being part of a stigmatized group contributes to these higher rates of mental health problems. However, acceptance and support from family, friends, and community can drastically improve outcomes. 1. Marriage equality. Marriage equality has been one of the most prominent issues for the LGBTQ community. In the U.S., the 2015 Supreme Court decision in Obergefell v. Hodges legalized same-sex marriage nationwide, though this right is still debated and under threat in many other countries. 2. Discrimination laws. In many places, LGBTQ individuals are still not fully protected from discrimination in employment, housing, and healthcare. In the U.S., for example, the 2020 Supreme Court case, Bostock v. Clayton County, ruled that the Civil Rights Act protects LGBTQ employees from discrimination, but the scope of protections varies widely around the world. 3. Gender identity laws. Laws surrounding legal recognition of gender identity vary widely. Some countries have progressive laws that allow individuals to change their gender markers on legal documents without undergoing surgery or hormone treatment, while others criminalize or refuse to recognize transgender identities. LGBTQ activism has been crucial in achieving many of the rights and protections that exist today. The Stonewall riots are often seen as the beginning of the modern LGBTQ rights movement in the U.S. Since then, events like pride parades, which celebrate LGBTQ identities and push for equality, have become global symbols of resistance and community empowerment. Some countries such as Canada, the Netherlands, and Sweden have strong protections for LGBTQ rights, including marriage equality, anti-discrimination laws, and the right to gender self-identification. In some places, LGBTQ individuals face severe repression. For example, countries like Saudi Arabia, Uganda, and Russia have laws that punish homosexuality with imprisonment or even death. LGBTQ has been a controversial topic in the world today. Getting the understanding of everything related to it is crucial for informed decision-making, behavior, and knowledge, which is the main purpose of this channel, to educate people. To learn more issues relating to this topic, or education and insights about science, history, technology, and many more, subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell to be prompted and get the information first.